A new disease outbreak has been recorded in Ghana, and it is in fact not a new disease, it's quite an old disease that is spread by a virus which causes symptoms much more deadly than COVID and is often fatal. This is the Marburg virus disease caused by the Marburg virus. This is not a new virus. It was identified in the 60s after an outbreak in Germany and has since been spotted in multiple parts of the world and specifically Africa. But this is the first time that it's been detected in Ghana. Epidemiologists and public health experts, however, are raising alarm over this virus. What about it is so scary? We are in an active pandemic right now, so we do have experience dealing with viruses. Rather, we have the knowledge for how to do it well, irrespective of adherence to science. So why is this one badly worrying a certain set of experts so much? The Marburg virus is no COVID virus or flu virus. It is actually quite deadly. The positive here is that it does not rapidly infect and does not spread as fast as COVID does. It spreads through bodily fluids, so through unprotected sexual activity and cuts and abrasions or open wounds on the skin. These are how the virus spreads. The natural reservoir for these viruses are a specific species of fruit bat, and bats of course are uniquely adapted to hosting hundreds of thousands of viruses in their physical bodies and not get infected. But bats can spread the virus to primates, including non-human primates and humans. It is highly infectious, this virus, meaning that it causes a severe disease, even though it is not highly contagious. There is no airborne transmission at all that we are aware of, like there is for COVID. The Marburg virus spreads only through bodily fluids. When the virus infects our bodies, the disease it causes is known as Marburg virus disease or MVD. It was formerly known as the Marburg hemorrhagic fever, and well, that's essentially what the disease does. It causes hemorrhage and blood loss. However, this blood loss is not what leads to death directly. What happens in advanced stages of MVD is organs start to fail, tissues start to die, blood pressure drops, and blood starts to coagulate within the body, eventually leading to death. After infection, the symptoms can last up to 3 weeks to a month, averaging about 20 days until final stage, which is either convalescence or recovery in some people, or fatality and death in others. There are two kinds of Marburg viruses, the Marburg virus and the Ramesh virus. It's a redundant name, but one of the specific virus is also named the same as the group of viruses that it belongs to. In fact, the virus is called the Marburg virus because it was named after the German town of Marburg, which saw the very first human outbreak in 1967. The virus incubates for about a week or so, and clinical symptoms start to show. These are things like very severe and sudden headaches, nausea and vomiting, conjunctivitis, rashes on the skin, and so on, until more serious symptoms start to show in a week. Then there's encephalitis or swelling of the brain, confusion, delirium, aggression, and there's also edema or fluid retention, shortness of breath, piles and bleeding excreta, even uncontrolled bleeding from small needle pricks. Then in the third week, symptoms either enter the convalescent healing phase with things like fibromyalgia, hepatitis, and psychosis, which is the good news. Symptoms could also worsen and become fatal, with the body deteriorating with a coma, convulsive attacks, going into shock, and ultimately dying. People typically die within 20 days of detection, and they can die as early as a week from detection. But not everyone dies. Since Germany, the virus has cropped up every few years in places like South Africa, in Belgrade in former Yugoslavia, in former Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, parts of the former Soviet Union, Netherlands, and US. Last year, there was one case in Guinea. Uganda has seen repeated cases, as has Kenya, but the Democratic Republic of Congo and Angola have seen only one outbreak each, and this is in fact the very first one in Ghana. In total, there have been 438 infected humans through history, and the largest outbreak was in Angola in 2004 to 2005, when 252 people were infected and 227 died. What about Germany? There were quite a few deaths then as well in the very first outbreak. So how did our first outbreak occur? How did this virus come from their natural reservoir, the bats, to the human population? Well, in this instance, it is not a conspiracy theory, but what happened was actually a lab leak. 27 people in labs got infected in Germany at the same time with this virus, and this was the first time it was seen in the human population. The only common experience that they had all had is that they had either handled a group of monkeys or handled monkey tissue. These monkeys are called grevets, and all of them had been imported from the same dealer in Uganda. Since the virus is endemic to the climate found in equatorial Africa, it was here that the monkeys were likely infected before they were imported to Europe. So, technically in Germany, the disease came from the lab and not from the natural animal population in the wild. The same thing has happened a couple of other times in Kosovo in the former Soviet Union. There were 2 cases in the late 80s and both were a lab accident. But this was a more insidious accident because during the Cold War, the Soviet Union was testing offensive biological warfare and weapons. This plan involved the country's top virology institutes back then, and the program also included the Marburg viruses. Results and updates from this offensive and defensive biowarfare program that the Soviet Union was undertaking have been highly classified, of course, and still not public. We have no idea what happened, but there were 2 lab accidents in 2 different years leading to the deaths of scientists and researchers. When we look at the case fatality rates of the Marburg virus, we can see that wealthier nations have a lower death rate as compared to previously colonized African nations. And even now, both the patients who were detected in Ghana have died. The infectiousness and virulence of this virus is so strong that all of the world's major health agencies classify it as one of the most deadliest or riskiest viruses. The WHO says it's a risk group 4 pathogen, which means that it requires biosafety level 4 for working on it and for PPE and containment. The COVID-causing coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, by contrast, is a BSL-3 virus, less dangerous. The American CDC and other agencies like that around the world have classified this virus as a category A or top tier bioterrorism agent. Export and import of this virus is not allowed in many countries. What public health officials are worrying about right now, though, is the fact that once the virus enters a person's body, there is no way to treat it directly. There are no drugs and treatments to treat the virus that causes the Marburg virus disease. You can only treat symptoms. And these symptoms are clinically identical to Ebola's symptoms. That is why when we hear about the Marburg virus, we see it often clubbed with Ebola. The virus can be latent in some people and reactivate later, causing a second infection like malaria does, or it could spread in that latent form through blood or semen as well. Children rarely seem to get infected, but they do. When people get infected, treatment for managing so many serious symptoms is exceedingly difficult and requires hospitalization in most cases because the disease progresses rapidly and seriously. But the problem with intensive treatment in hospitals is that as the disease becomes more and more severe in the body and organs start to deteriorate, invasive procedures are needed. Except if a procedure is invasive, the risk of spread of the virus immediately goes up because there's exposure of bodily fluids, tissues, and blood. All in all, the healthcare system globally is in a generally overwhelmed state right now with varying waves of COVID, risk of sudden spikes in cases, and of course, in some places, newer outbreaks like the monkeypox. Because of this, several experts are extremely worried about this very small outbreak in Ghana. In all likelihood, it could just remain these 2 isolated cases. When we look at the list of previous cases, we can see many where there are just 1 or 2 cases in an outbreak in a location. So maybe this will turn out that way too. Or maybe it won't. There have been cases with hundreds of infections. We can't tell just yet at this moment. Public health authorities are as yet unclear how this disease and this outbreak is going to progress. The WHO is preparing for an outbreak response, and meanwhile, public health authorities are urging health systems all over the globe to ramp up in preparation as a precaution against this virus.